Y'all hear me? All right. So, masturbating. Don't click bait, click yourself. So go ahead and prepare your shot glass. I have a lot of buzzwords incoming, a lot of the buzzwords of our industry. Kind of play that shot glass game or that bingo or whatever, whenever they come up. You might be asking yourself, what is this talk about, really? Because we all know about not falling for phishing on emails or websites and stuff like that. But what about in the real world where you can't hover a link? I want to provide methods and actions to take to understand yourself better, to avoid phishing, not just professionally and online, but in your everyday life and personal relationships. So I'm going to teach you to masturbate. We'll do that by covering the definition, the sources, vulnerabilities to it, analyzing, removing, and then protecting from it again in the future. So who am I? I am BACE16. They kind of introduced me a little bit already. Email, Twitter, the DC 919 websites. I'm always on the DEF CON Slack, probably too much. I'm also a thought leader. There's your first buzzword page. I'm not actually a thought leader. This kind of talk has been done before and will be done again by other people. I'm not really special. I have my own experience and my own styles that might be something that resonate with you, but it might not be. Honestly, the best presenter for this type of talk is the one that said what you needed to hear when you needed to hear it. So the first step to masturbate is definition. What is it exactly? So phishing is using social engineering, using bait in order to get a reaction. You set up a story, and then you make somebody chase that story to the ending that you want. Or sometimes people just want to watch a story. It's typically done via cyber, except I'm going to focus more on the real world today and kind of get out of that cyber realm a little bit. So what exactly is bait? Bait is going to be anything that makes you chase a story. It mostly falls under 4 major categories, such as money, stuff like the Nigerian prince or imitating your bank. Sex, it's pretty obvious. You got sexy singles in your area that want to talk to you, or like you got porn bots and stuff like that. You have power, control or loss of control, like spoofing the FBI, law enforcement, IT, or any sort of authority figure to try to get you to then give over credentials, or somebody who's threatening to take your power or offering you a chance for even more power. And then there's the sense of love or acceptance is the 4th one. This is your worth or your value. Like everybody's going to hate you if you do this certain thing, or everybody will love you if you do this other thing. If you're able to use multiple types of bait and hit all these categories at the same time, it's a lot more effective. For example, you have like a catfish and then blackmail. So you lure in a married guy with sex, and then you flip it with the blackmail, and now he's lost his power over the situation, and he's baited with the threat of losing even more power, love, sex, and money from the wife. So go ahead and grab your shot glass. And moving on to the sources. So where does all this bait come from anyway? A lot of bait comes from the cloud. Cloud is like societal and cultural ideas. These are things like stereotypes, gender roles, titles like IT person, introvert, hacker. You feel like you have to fit into these certain roles, or sometimes you act in exaggerated ways to prove that you don't fall into these typical roles that are defined by the cloud. And like running the DEF CON meetings, I've talked to a whole lot of people who they're afraid to come out to a meeting and afraid to come out to things like this because they don't think that they're smart enough or hacker enough. And it's because they've fallen for the cloud's definition of hacker, and they're applying that to themselves even when it's not totally accurate. Other sources of bait are other people. They can be doing unintentional phishing. This is their unskilled behavior, or just things about them that can cause a reaction in you. It doesn't mean that they're actually trying to bait you into doing something, but you do kind of end up chasing a story. These are things like language, like they have unfortunate word choice, or they have certain phrasing in the way that they talk. They can have cultural differences, where they're different parts of the country and different parts of the world will express themselves differently, and that can cause you to chase something. It could be their ignorance. They just have a behavior that they aren't aware of that is rude or hurtful to other people. They probably need to have that pointed out to them in like a polite way so that they can fix it, because it could be completely normal to them, but they could be having other people chase bait with that. Other people also, they don't listen, or they might not be paying close enough attention, they're distracted, they're not interested, and that can make you chase something as well. A lot of the times it's mistakes, it's them, it's not you. But sometimes other people are intentional in wanting you to chase a story, and they are malicious, and they are full of malware. So things that are malicious, they're intentional phishing, things like sarcasm or too much devil's advocate, basically where they're being an asshole. They just want you to chase a story to chase a story. They might not have an ending in mind, or maybe they're trying to get you to change your opinion on something. They can use guilt or shame. Maybe they know certain things about you, especially your most vulnerable things. They know your bait, they know what you're vulnerable to, and they make you feel worse and try to make you take actions that way, or maybe they try to make you feel better about those things. There's threats and rewards. They can threaten to take away certain things from you, or maybe try to provide certain things depending on your bait. And then there's gaslighting. Gaslighting is more like warping your sense of reality, so you're not sure what's real and what's not, and that makes it easier for you to chase a bait when they present it to you. All right, so we could also have phishing from our source of bait can be from ourselves. We have unintentional and often idle thoughts that are programmed by your personal history. Things like your nature. We're humans. We're wired for flight or flight and don't process well under stress. So this is where like our animal brain kicks in because it thinks it has to in order to keep you alive. You can't sit still and fully process things when you think you're gonna die. So the other thing is like your nurture. Things like your first family, the people that you were raised by, you had no choice in picking them out. They're gonna teach you what, your family is gonna teach you what is familiar, even if it's not healthy for you and it's really a liar. You might have to go back through that first family and see where they maybe taught you some things that weren't exactly healthy for you. Like your family could be rich or poor, but if you had an unhealthy attitude towards money in either situation, you probably inherited that. Your primary bait is probably going to be what was least healthy in your first family. You shouldn't be getting sex from your first family at all, but like, if there was a lot of anxiety about it, like growing up, like your parents never talked to you or anything about it, if you're in like a super sheltered or like overly religious family that just never talked about it or even shamed it, then you're going to have kind of problems in your adult life as you go on, and that can be one of your primary types of bait. The other thing that we have from ourselves for the sources is going to be intentional thoughts. These are your fully conscious and decided thoughts, but sometimes you don't recognize that you're consciously making these decisions about how you feel or think about yourself. A lot of this can come from your second family or who you choose as an adult and who you interact with most often. These are people like your significant other, where you should be getting the sex, and that should be all healthy and awesome. If it's not your immediate family as your second family, then it's going to be your chosen social tribe who you hang out with the most. They're going to kind of shape what's normal for you. And this is kind of your belief systems. These are the things that you tell yourself or what you tell others about yourself. So things like, I drive a Prius, I'm a good person. So or things like, you have your intended career path, you have your actual career path, and then the difference is why you drink. So you can be baiting yourself in those ways. I kind of put these slides in here too to kind of remind myself to slow down and drink. So, all right, our next step is going to be vulnerabilities. What makes you more vulnerable to falling for phishing? There's a big idea that it's all about intelligence, where only non-intelligent people will fall for phishing. We look at a lot of these stories in our industry, and it's kind of baffling how people fall for certain things when you hear about them as an outside observer. But the thing is like in that moment, like we're susceptible to it every day. Even the most intelligent people among us, even the people that do this like for a living, go out and fish, they'll end up falling for it eventually. It's just a matter of being unskilled and kind of being out of the moment. It's not really that you're not intelligent or you're dumb or anything. You just kind of fall for things after a while. We also have our human program, our conscious behavior. Like, it's great being aware, having full awareness and being able to focus on your current thoughts and able to ignore all sorts of distractions and everything. In a perfect world, we'd all be completely aware and conscious all the time. Nothing would ever distract us. We'd be able to perfectly interpret our reality. But we're human, we're gonna slip out of it. You're gonna find something to distract you and not pay attention. One of the biggest sources of this is stress. Stress is like a big giant DDoS against your awareness. Things that can contribute to the stress are going to be things like depression is a big one. It makes you much more vulnerable to phishing when you're depressed. It's a common thing in the world in general, but especially in our fast-paced IT world. It can sneak up on you. It's when you have at least 2 weeks of symptoms where you've noticed that you have difficulty thinking, concentrating, making decisions. That's going to play a lot into falling for phishing. You have a loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you once enjoyed, feeling of worthlessness or guilty, an increase in purposeless physical activity. So the depression is kind of like the underperformer, and then you have the imposter experience that also gives you the difficulty thinking, concentrating, making decisions. You kind of become a workaholic, where you work so much, but you've lost interest in pleasure or leisure activities that you once enjoyed. You have a fear of failure, where you feel kind of worthless or guilty. You have an increase in purposeful activity, that overworking. So the imposter experience is more of an overachiever, the depression is a little bit of an underachiever, but they both make you more susceptible to phishing. All right. So those are your vulnerabilities, and now we're moving on to analysis, how you analyze the bait that's in your world, in your life right now. So we're going to do that with a SEM system. We're going to go ahead and turn on logging. You want to write down or voice note your bait, either when you notice it, or maybe do like a nightly logging and check what's going on with you. Logs are super helpful to track your progress. It can be slow and hard to see at first, but as you start seeing it and start noting it down, it helps you figure out what's going on. And if you're normally a vocal person, vocalize out your stuff first, but then write it down. And then if you're a quiet person, write it first and then vocalize. A bonus side effect of writing a journal is that your writing gets better. Like, my handwriting was terrible in the beginning. My thoughts were all over the place. I started to write down a lot more. Handwriting got better, grammar got better, thought process got better. But if you do the written journaling, you're going to want to do a pen test because it sucks to be in the middle of a sentence and run out of ink. Like, okay, so I did a bunch of journaling for like a year, a little bit longer than that. So I gathered all this big data in my journal, and I put it all out into this chart, put all the times I was being baited and everything. So then I ran it through machine learning, and I ended up with this lovely graph. And then I decided to run it through some deep learning. And then I ended up with this pie chart. And I don't really know what to do with any of this data, so I called in another expert on masturbate, and what's the significance? He doesn't know either, but Facebook probably does. Anyway, the lesson here is that you can chase stuff down really weird paths that aren't really super helpful. You just want to keep it basic to your primary types of bait, and then figure out what's going on that way. That was great, yeah. All right, so when you're not logging, you have alerts. Emotions are your alerts. You feel really good or you feel like crap for a reason. This is your real-time data that's coming in like all the time. You want to stop ignoring or suppressing your alerts and your emotions. You want to sit with it and understand why it is that you're feeling a certain way. It's easier to understand the really good feelings, but it can be harder to understand the bad ones, but you still want to take a look at them and analyze and see what's going on. We all have emotions. It's completely human. Unfortunately, in our culture, men are typically suppressors. They'll suppress these alerts a lot more. But our culture kind of encourages that. It has kind of started to come around a little bit more, a little bit better. Women typically have the V, as in verbose mode. Some women are much more verbose than others, but then you have some men that are also verbose. I'm not saying to run verbose mode all the time. You certainly don't want to do that. Just realize that your emotions are there. You can turn on a verbose mode. You can look at it a little bit more in depth. Another good way is to analyze your bait and everything is to periodically check in with yourself. So instead of checking social media in the bathroom, stop and do a quick review of how you're feeling and if there's anything baiting you. It feels really stupid and it can be difficult at first, but it gets easier and it's actually pretty helpful. You want to take a look at the situation, like what's going on, who are you interacting with, what are you interacting with, what's been going on with you. Take a look at your feeling, what exactly it is that you're feeling. The first few days, it's going to be, might be a little bit difficult, especially if you've been suppressing these alerts and stuff for a while, and you just want to identify that. And then take a look if there's any actions, anything that you can do to change how you're feeling, change the situation, or anything like that. So you want to, after you've done all this logging, you want to review your logs and look at your behavior and see if there's any actions that you're already performing. Actions such as triangling. The relationship between two things is going to be unstable. We triangle out to a third party to try to gain more stability. This happens when you have a problem with the second party, but instead of focusing on that problem, you focus on or you create a problem with a third party. Often the issue you think that you see in the third party is really between you or the second party. Things like parents that think that they have a problem child. This could be a triangle out from the parents' relationship. The parents have the problem, but instead of focusing on each other and their problem, they're going to focus on the child or like this third thing. This can also be why people are assholes to just random strangers. It's nothing to do with you. They have something else going on with the second party. And it can be a real problem if you never go back and fix the issue with the second party or you work that out. So it can be one of the hardest things is like taking a look and actually addressing that. The other thing you want to look at is your vices. Your vices, which are any instant reward or distraction. These can be necessary and used for good, but they can become a way to suppress or avoid alerts and affect your life. Then it turns into a problem. Things like food, like it's necessary to live, but I was uncomfortable writing this talk and going through and doing a lot of this research, and I would all of a sudden find myself in the kitchen, and I'd be like, wait, I'm not hungry. But I'm just anxious because I'm digging stuff up and it's like, oh, instant reward. So I kind of just sat with it for a minute, drank some water, and then went back to working on things. Things like alcohol is like a big one in our industry. Like a few drinks and being buzzed is fine or okay. But it's like if you get trashed and it affects your life regularly, you might want to kind of step back and take a look at that vice and see what's really going on. Drugs is a big one that's pretty self-explanatory. Like you kind of already have to feel like crap and be suppressing a lot of stuff in order to start taking drugs. But people get hooked on pain medication because it also kind of numbs out the emotional feelings as well. And then lately, social media has become a big one where you have likes, upvotes, and pings. They have become very addictive. Going back to the Facebook, like a lot of the founders have come out and said that it's very addictive and they're almost sorry for creating the thing. So you want to take a look at the vices, practice recognizing these and focusing, like, are you using it just to have fun or are you using it to kind of cover or suppress something else that's going on? All right, so we know that awareness isn't enough. All the steps so far have kind of been about awareness and taking a look and understanding what it is. So knowing is only half the battle. The other half is lasers, taking laser-like action. All right, so our next step to masturbate is going to be removal. You want to remove all those things that are kind of baiting you. So you're going to learn to meditate. It's a really great way to do this. You find or create a practice area, clear all your distractions and obstacles, slip into something comfortable, get a nice place to sit, lock the door, set do not disturb on your phone, set a timer for 10 minutes, and then do whatever it takes to relax yourself and get in touch with yourself. For the first few times, all you're gonna do is just sit comfortably and kind of focus on your breath. If thoughts come up, recognize that they're there, but don't go chasing a story or anything. Let them kind of breeze by. Because meditation is kind of like a mental defragration, where it's really weird the first couple of times, but it does get better. Your files are kind of all jumbled up, all your thoughts and everything, and then you kind of create a clear space where you have room to think. This helps you see your bait more clearly and everything. So after you sit with a few times without chasing, you want to take a look at any hooks that you've bitten and really analyze them and see kind of like what's going on. Introduce your bait a little bit. Don't go chasing stories. You want to take a look at the bait, like what it is and why it is that you have it there. So like you want to take a look at like how deep it goes. Like it probably starts with what if scenarios, like all that stuff all those stories that you want to chase, all the rationalization. But there's probably like an initial trauma or initial time that it came up in your life. And then, your first family's teaching or programming kind of helped build all that rationalization and help you chase those stories and everything. And going back and analyzing that and kind of clearing that out. That gets into removing these hooks after you've analyzed it. If it's complicated, make a plan. You might have had the hook for years and have grown around it or grown really used to it. Or maybe you created a life that is compensating for this hook that you have now. And it might take you just as long to fully remove it as it did for you to have that hook around. Have an idea of what your removed state is going to look like so you know when it's fully removed. And if it's going to take a while, figure out how to track the progress or create goals as you go. At the very least, follow up on your logs. And then just pull it out. Accept the current state with the hook and know that you're working on it. If you don't need the hook, it might feel like you're going to be more injured without it, and you might at first, but you will survive and you will recover. Accept your past state, forgive yourself for your past mistakes, and biting the hook, it happened, you can't unbite your hook, you can't really get over the bait that happened in the past, stop carrying around any extra weight that you have about it. It's forgive, not forget. Learn the lessons that you need to, but then get rid of any resentment that you have over it. And then forgive yourself for judging yourself on the past mistakes. In the second phase, you can hold it over yourself again by judging yourself for the past actions. And you want to forgive yourself for that. So it's like if you think that you're dumb because you bit it, then you're angry at yourself because you feel like you were dumb. And it's just that you were unskilled at the time, and like you know better now, you're learning your lessons and you're moving on. And then accept the new state that you'll be in after the hook is removed. So we have advanced persistent threats. These are the sources of bait that you want to remove when at all possible. So to remove that, you want to review it fully to be sure that it really is a source of bait, that it's just not you overreacting to something. It's consistently causing you harm. You've made it known that it's causing you harm. You've done all in your power to request it to change, or you've changed yourself to mitigate the harm, but it still continues to harm you. This is toxic, and it should be removed from your life, or you need to remove yourself from the situation. And this can be extremely difficult to do, especially if it requires a major life change, but things will improve once that bait is gone. You want to remove the vices, if you're having problems with vices, so that it's easier to see the bait. So you have a craving for vice as an alert that something is going on, and the vice covers this up. Like happy hour is pretty obvious. It helps take the stress off the workday, and that can be, that's super obvious, you know what's going on there. But if you're doing a little bit more above and beyond that, you might want to check in a little bit. All right. I gotta keep remembering to drink myself. Okay. All right. So the final step in learning to masturbate is protection. So we're going to set up a defense in depth strategy. Where you understand that you cannot change others, and that comparing yourself to others is chasing a story, and that creates resentment or pride in you. And then probably, if you watch South Park, you know about the safe space thing. You can't make a safe space everywhere as much as people try and everything, there are going to be things that bait you or cause you to have a reaction or make you feel sad or upset or whatever. If you work on your meditation enough, you can start to recognize that outside of the meditation space when you start to chase something and stop yourself and then focus on yourself. So bait is reactive. Bait and phishing, they make you have a reaction. We want to build a proactive program. So we have this idle background processing that, you really only focus on the active on them when they mess up, and that's when you check in on it. This is when your alerts or emotions go off. Your subconscious behaviors can get in the way when you're unaware or unskilled, but you can bring it forward. It takes practice. It's like blinking or breathing. This is where meditating comes in. You just want to kind of remind yourself that you can take control of it. But you want to be proactive. You don't want to be super positive. You're not brainwashing yourself into positive thinking, putting on rose-colored glasses and thinking everything's wonderful. Because chasing a positive story is just as bad as chasing like a negative one. You just want to learn to see reality as clearly as possible. And then part of setting that up is creating a firewall to protect yourself, like in your brain. So you have, you know the types of bait. You know that there's money, sex, power, love. You know the sources of bait now, where you have the cloud, others, and yourself. You've now turned on logging, so you can see where the bait is and how you're interacting with it. If you're checking in with your alerts, you know when like bait is nearby and what's going on. And now you can start to set up rules, limits, and tripwires on yourself. A lot of us probably got this from our first families, if there's any sort of religion growing up. Like, religion is really good at setting up rules on all the types of bait and stuff, like no sex outside of marriage is a pretty like strict, solid one. But if you're not into theology or anything like that, you just want to kind of set up rules for yourself as you go. For example, like power, like you won't take a job where you're a manager for less than 3 people, or like you understand when things start to get overwhelming, you're going to delegate out. For money, you want to know your price. Will you do 10 cents a day with Google rewards for doing a survey? Will you fill out a different survey for a $5 Amazon gift card? Will you pay $2 to come see a Carolina Con talk? You won't change jobs for less than 10% raise. When it comes to the sex and the love, I found this nifty little chart. This is mostly for men dating women, the universal hot crazy matrix. So for things like sex, you want to set a timer or requirements. Like, you don't go out and have like one night stands. Maybe you want to date somebody for so long and like make sure they get an STD test or something first. And then, like for love, you just want to increase the logging, take a look at what's really going on, make sure that you're really in love with yourself, follow like the matrix there. And then when you set up these rules and these firewalls on yourself, you want to make sure that it's a next generation firewall. You don't want to apply this to your past and then beat yourself up because you didn't follow it in the past. This is all going forward, so don't bait yourself over past mistakes. Keep it next generation. And then as you use this, you're going to go forward and you're going to block the chain of events in your mind. So you're going to block the way that you react. All right, the next step in our defense in depth is going to be creating a defense network to help you out with this. So, have you ever buried your face in your hands because nobody around you understands or has the slightest idea that what makes you be? Sometimes you need a little bit of help. When things get so bad, you need a fourth hand. All right. So, your defense network, who are they going to be? You want to get a community that you can belong to. You're going to build this up over time. As you discuss primary topics with them, you'll feel less like a poser or a fraud. You'll also get friends and slowly start to discuss personal things. So this can be stuff like the 2600, hacker communities, like DEF CON groups, like we have 828 in Asheville, 910 in Fayetteville, and then of course 919 is here in RTP. If you're outside of this area, look them up by area code. There's a whole website and everything dedicated to them. The 2600 has websites and they're kind of everywhere in the country too. Meet people at conferences. The talks at the conferences are, especially this one, are only meant to introduce you to a subject, a topic, kind of get your feet wet a little bit. They aren't meant to be like an end-all be-all on the topic. and it's mostly to start a dialogue, talk to the speakers, talk to other people about the talks that you see. I'm hoping that this talk makes HallwayCon a lot more interesting and gets people more involved in discussing things with other people. And then I suggest getting something completely different from technology, just to kind of get more variety. Go to school, go to church, go to a book club, a strip club, a bar, just something, get out that's completely different. And then, of course, get an inner circle of solid friends or family to kind of help you out with this. But then what do you do with this defense network? You set them up and you tell them like what's going on with you for like sanity checks is a great one. Talk to your trusted friends or family, keep it to the facts, don't get it emotionally charged, don't make them chase a story along with you. But they can tell after a while when you start to get emotionally charged and you start to chase a story, they can be an early warning system for you and help you out with that. They can recognize things that you might not be recognizing in yourself. You can also escalate to them if you're really having problems. They can help you review your logs, maybe understand what your issue is. Maybe they have seen this issue before and they can offer insight, help you review any of the options that you've come up with yourself for how to work on something, and might be able to suggest solutions on how to get started and work on that. But sometimes friends and family aren't enough and you need to go to a professional. And just like professional hackers, the mental health professionals also have a stigma and stereotype problem about them. Go ahead and admit it if you need help and go out and get it. We need a lot less stigma around people getting out and getting mental health help if they need it. The stereotypes on professionals are awful and often cause people to not go get help. Like I put it off for so long because I was afraid that I was going to be told I was hopeless or I couldn't be fixed or they're going to change some things. Another good point with the professionals is that it's completely confidential and it's outside of your circle if you have something that's going on and you need to talk to somebody that's not going to be involved with your everyday. They also have a lot more experience troubleshooting than you do on these issues where they see it every day and they can help out with that. Just like tech support though, some of them are amazing and some of them are absolutely terrible. So you might have to go around a little bit to find one that fits you and your issues. They aren't going to change you. That was one of the reasons why I put it off for so long because I was afraid that they would change me and I would stop being who I was. But I was at a point where the me that I was so bad that I would do anything to change that. So it was, and I really wish that I had gone out sooner. They aren't going to force you to change anything. It's just like when you call the vendor for help on like a piece of tech. They might have a patch and they might have some way to fix it, but at the end of the day, you still have to apply it. You still have to make that work for yourself. And then they don't want to see you forever either. They're going to set you up on a plan to get you kind of out from under it after a while. It's expensive, but investing in yourself is so worth it, and it's such a better investment than Bitcoin. Investing in yourself is definitely going to go up consistently and not do all the bouncing that Bitcoin has done. So next is moving into like continued action. Now that you kind of have all this plan and everything, putting it all together. A good way of doing that is challenging yourself. Put challenges in front of you that are going to change you to be the person that you want to be. You'll feel like less of an imposter or a fraud, and it can help pull you out of a depression, make you more aware. When you have a goal and you're focused on that goal, it helps you see the distractions a little bit more, what's pulling you away from the goal, so that you can focus and accomplish things. And you'll be less likely to take the bait if you're already focused on something else. So a little bit more about like my story was that I was like in a massive rut. I didn't have any local friends. I wasn't talking to my distant friends or family, and I absolutely hated my job. I felt like I wasn't loved and I didn't have love for my work anymore. I wanted friends and I wanted to be passionate about technology again. I felt like I had tried and failed a bunch of times before in the past and it was hopeless. I had finally broken down and went to therapy where I learned new techniques and behaviors and how to change. And then, like for me, it was really easy to skip meetings. Like there's a lot of good local groups around here, but I would get lazy and I would just skip meetings when I wasn't required to go. A lot of the other groups are great, but there was a lot of just kind of sitting around and talking, and I wanted presentations and like hands-on and learning things. So I started up DEF CON 919. I got friends. I reached back out to my old friends to like learn how to set it up, talking to my family. I got really excited about security and technology and everything again. So I put that challenge out there. I got that goal, and I kind of did that. So it's also enjoying the trip. So that was last year's goal, was to like get a group, get it up and going, have people and everything. This year's challenge was, hey, I want to submit for a call for papers and go to a conference and speak. So it's like, hey, that's done and it's only April. What do I do now? So yeah, totally embrace what you enjoy. The only things that are wrong are harmful to yourself or others or illegal. Don't do those things. Otherwise, ignore the cloud, ignore others, focus on yourself and what you enjoy in life. It makes decision making easier. So big thing is accept those challenges. All right. So to recap, I taught you how to masturbate by going over the definition, the sources, the analysis, the vulnerabilities, and then taking action with the removal and the protection. So now that I've done all this, kind of like a what's next, what's coming up, I figure I'll do something on associate baiting, fake it till you make it, bachelor baiting, red fish, blue fish. I just did masturbating, doctor baiting. You're gonna have to come to that one and see what that one's about. Just a big thank you to Caroline Con staff for putting all this together and for accepting my ridiculous talk. The entire hacker community, especially local groups, and then every member of DEF CON 919, because I'd just be a crazy, lonely person in the library without all you guys. And then my inner circle. So, any questions? Right.
How long did it take you when you started meditating before you weren't just sitting in a room going, wow, this is bullshit and I just need to be doing something else?
Probably 3 weeks or a month, where I'm just, I had to keep up with it like every day. Like the meditating is hard in the beginning.
So that really goes away after a while?
It does, eventually, yeah, like eventually.
Okay.
Are there any good books or reads out there that like, kind of dovetail with what you've been discussing?
Yeah, I was gonna put my whole book list up here, but it was like pages and pages, like all the crap that I've been reading for like the last 2 years. Like I joke around, this is my capstone project for the master's degree I wasn't actually working on, so. Yeah, if you're only gonna read one or two, I would say probably, I think it's called The New World. It's on like Oprah's book list. That was a really good one. Kind of blanking on some of the other ones I read now. The games people play. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. Yeah.
You found that self-masturbating improves your cyber phishing?
Sorry, what? Yes, sure.
Have you found that self-masturbating has improved your cyber phishing?
Wait.
Self-masturbating has improved your cyber phishing.
My I haven't tried to cyber fish in a while. Like, so. Yeah. Okay.
So, I was noting that whole thing about dating question. Have you ever heard of technique?
What?
So, I noticed there was one slide there you had a bunch of like, number of times this happened, this happened, this happened.
Oh yeah.
There was an app on Android I found from Android that is that actually does a lot of that. It's called one-bit journaling. So, if you notice something come up, you put that thing, just pick a box and it's like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah, so I had started to research apps because I'm like, it would be great if I actually had something technical at a hacking conference. But like a lot of them wanted like weird permissions and stuff. I'm like, you don't need to have access to my contacts for me to, you know, tell you if I'm happy right now. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like Vaporware because basically there's a lot of because it's all open source, and so like they show you like whatever. Yeah, take me as like prevent folks from sleeping. Okay, or set an alarm or something. Yeah, okay. But yeah, it's yeah, basically it's like a 1-bit journal. So like you put down various things, and it's like had a thought today about this, or felt love or felt unloved or whatever.
Yeah.
You go back and look it over. I just think it's helpful. I played with this in the past. I've really like done much else with it, but
Okay, cool. Thank you.